512. That's how many likes your last post got. You remember the number. You checked it 14 times in 3 hours. You checked it while eating dinner. You checked it in bed with the screen brightness turned down so no one would see. And when the number climbed, something inside you relaxed, like a fist unclenching in your chest. You felt seen. You felt approved. You felt for a few minutes like you mattered. Then the notifications slowed, the likes trickled, and by the next morning the post was already buried under someone else's content. The little burst of enough was gone, and in its place the familiar ache returned. The quiet hunger, not for food, for confirmation, for proof that you exist and that your existence has value. You didn't post because you wanted to share. You posted because you needed to be fed, and the meal was never enough. This is the validation trap, and if you're honest with yourself right now, you know you're in it. Let's be direct about what's actually happening. You have trained your brain to outsource the most fundamental human need, the need to feel worthy, to a number on a screen controlled by strangers. Not strangers who know you. Strangers who paused for half a second, tapped a heart, and kept scrolling. That half-second tap is what your self-worth runs on now. That's the fuel. And you're starving because it burns as fast as it arrives. No amount of likes is ever enough because likes aren't nourishment. They're a simulation of nourishment. They activate the same reward circuits as genuine human connection, but they deliver none of the substance. It's the psychological equivalent of eating packing peanuts. Your brain registers the input. Your soul stays empty. The surface problem everyone points at is vanity. They say you're narcissistic, self-obsessed, attention-seeking. That judgment comes from people who don't understand what they're looking at. And it's wrong, and it's cruel, and it keeps you trapped because it makes you ashamed of a behavior you didn't choose. The real problem is dependency. You're not vain. You're dependent. Your sense of worth has been systematically detached from internal sources. Your values, your character, your lived experience of being a capable human being, and reattached to external ones. To likes, to comments, to follower counts, to engagement metrics that fluctuate based on factors you can't see or control. You didn't do this to yourself on purpose. Nobody wakes up one morning and consciously decides to make their self-esteem dependent on a like count. This happened gradually, over years, engineered by platforms that were meticulously designed to create exactly this dependency. Because dependency equals engagement, and engagement equals profit. Your hunger is their business model. And it's worse than feeling empty after a post. This dependency is reshaping every part of your life. How you decide what to wear, what to eat, where to go, what to say, who to become. Every decision now runs through a filter. Will this get approved? Will this get noticed? Will this be liked? You're not living your life, you're performing it. And the audience is an algorithm that doesn't know your name, doesn't care about your happiness, and will forget your post by tomorrow. Research tells a clear story. A study published in the journal Computers and Human Behavior found that people who rely on social media for self-esteem validation are significantly more likely to experience depressive symptoms and anxiety. The Royal Society for Public Health identified social media platforms as the leading contributor to poor mental health in young adults, with validation-seeking behavior as a central driver. Psychologists at the University of Pittsburgh found that the frequency of checking social media, not just the total time spent, was the strongest predictor of depression and anxiety. It's the checking, the refreshing, the counting, the behavior of someone who is hungry and keeps opening an empty refrigerator hoping food will appear. That's not casual use. That's compulsion. And it's driven by a hunger that no notification can satisfy. You've been running on this fuel for years. Calculate the cost, the authentic moments you missed because you were framing them for a post, the creative work you abandoned because it didn't get engagement, the opinions you silenced because they might not be popular, the parts of yourself you buried because they weren't likable, the relationships where you were more concerned with appearing connected than actually being connected. Every year in the validation trap is a year you traded authenticity for approval. And approval expired before your head hit the pillow. You're about to learn the complete psychology of why likes feel like food but leave you starving. The neuroscience of validation addiction. How the trap was built and why you walked into it. What it's cost your identity, your creativity, and your capacity foe. Our genuine connection. The specific shift from external feeding to internal nourishment. And the daily practices that break the dependency permanently. This isn't going to tell you to stop caring what people think. That's not human. This is about understanding why your caring has become a compulsion and building a self-worth system that doesn't require a single notification to function. By the end of this hour, you won't stop wanting approval. That's hardwired. But you'll understand the trap completely. You'll have a framework for generating your own sense of worth from the inside, and you'll know the difference between healthy connection and toxic dependency. That's the difference between living and performing. Are you willing to look at the thing you've been calling connection and see it for what it actually is? Are you willing to feel the hunger without immediately reaching for the phone to feed it? This requires honesty, not the kind you post about. The kind that stays between you and yourself, the uncomfortable kind, the kind that doesn't get likes. 45 minutes, less time than you spent today curating how you appear to strangers, but enough to understand why you're starving and how to actually eat. Let's go. Chapter 1. Why likes feel like love, the neuroscience of validation addiction. There's a reason a like feels so good. A real, measurable, neuroscientific reason. It's not shallow. It's not vanity. It's your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, just in an environment it was never designed for. Understanding this mechanism is the difference between blaming yourself for being weak and recognizing that you're being exploited. So let's look inside. When you receive a like, a comment, a share, or a follow, your brain releases dopamine. But here's what most people get wrong about dopamine. It's not a pleasure chemical. It's a reinforcement chemical. It doesn't make you happy. It makes you repeat. Its job is to tag experiences as worth doing again. When your brain releases dopamine in response to a like, it's not saying this feels good. It's saying do this again, post again, check again, refresh again. The behavior gets reinforced regardless of whether it actually improved your life. This is the same mechanism that drives every addiction: nicotine, gambling, alcohol. The substance provides a chemical signal that says more, and the brain obeys. Social media validation works on the identical circuit. The only difference is that the substance is delivered through a screen instead of a syringe. This is crucial. The dopamine response to social media validation operates on a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. That's psychology's term for the most addictive reward pattern known to science. Sometimes your post gets massive engagement. Sometimes it gets almost nothing. The unpredictability is the hook. If you got the exact same response every time, your brain would habituate and stop caring. But because you never know whether this post will be the one that blows up, your brain stays in a perpetual state of anticipation. Check, refresh, check, refresh. You're pulling the lever on a slot machine, and the jackpot is someone else's approval. But here's where the neuroscience gets darker. Your brain doesn't just respond to receiving validation. It responds to the absence of it. When you post something and the likes don't come, or don't come fast enough, or don't come from the right people, your brain registers that as social rejection. Not mild disappointment. Rejection. Neuroimaging studies have shown that social media exclusion activates the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula. These are the same regions that process physical pain. Your brain literally cannot distinguish between a low-like count and being rejected by your social group. In evolutionary terms, that makes sense. For 100,000 years, social rejection meant death. If the tribe didn't accept you, you were alone. Alone meant vulnerable. Vulnerable meant dead. Your brain still carries that programming. It doesn't know the difference between tribal rejection and 42 likes instead of 400. Both register as you are not valued, you are at risk. Here's what actually happens when this cycle runs repeatedly over months and years. Your brain's reward threshold shifts. This is called tolerance, and it works exactly the same way it works in substance addiction. The amount of validation that used to feel satisfying no longer does. 100 likes used to feel amazing. Now it feels average. Now you need 200. 300, a viral post, a feature. The bar keeps rising because your dopamine receptors are downregulating, becoming less sensitive to the stimulus. You need more of the drug to get the same effect. This is why no amount of likes is ever enough. Your brain has literally adapted to require increasing doses of external approval to feel the same baseline level of okay. Most people miss this about the validation cycle. It doesn't just affect how you feel about your posts. It restructures your entire reward system. Your brain starts to prioritize validation-seeking behavior over other sources of reward. The satisfaction you used to get from finishing a project, from a quiet evening with someone you love, from creating something nobody sees, all of that gets dimmer. Not because those experiences changed. Because your brain has been trained to value the dopamine hit from external approval above the subtler, deeper rewards of internal satisfaction. The loud reward drowns out the quiet ones. And over time, you lose the ability to feel nourished by anything that doesn't come with a notification. There's another mechanism at play, and it connects the dopamine story to something much deeper. Psychologists call it contingent self-worth. This is when your sense of your own value becomes conditional on specific external outcomes. I'm worthy if people like my content. I'm valuable if I get engagement. I matter if my post performs well. I'm enough if the numbers go up. The if is the trap, because it means your worth has a condition attached to it. And a condition means your worth can be revoked at a NY time by forces entirely outside your control. One bad post, one drop in engagement, one algorithm change that suddenly buries your content, and according to the equation your brain has written, you're worthless. Not just disappointed, not just having a bad day, worthless. Because your worth was never based on who you are as a person. It was based on what the numbers said about your latest performance. This is fundamentally different from how self-worth is supposed to work. Healthy self-worth is what psychologists call non-contingent. It exists because you exist. It's grounded in your character, your values, your choices, your fundamental humanity. It doesn't require input to maintain. It doesn't crash when the numbers drop. But contingent self-worth, the kind the validation trap creates, is a roller coaster controlled by someone else's hand on the lever. Up when the likes surge. Down when they don't. Up when you go viral. Down when you're ignored. You're riding a roller coaster in the dark, and the operator is an algorithm that doesn't know your name. Let's talk about what this looks like in your body, because this isn't just a mental phenomenon. Validation dependency creates a physiological stress response. When you're waiting for feedback on a post, your cortisol levels elevate. Cortisol is your stress hormone. It increases heart rate, disrupts sleep, impairs digestion, and suppresses your immune system. You are literally in a low-grade fight-or-flight state while waiting to see if strangers approve of a photo you posted. When the approval comes, cortisol drops and dopamine spikes. When it doesn't, cortisol stays elevated and you remain in stress. This cycle, stress, relief, repeated dozens of times daily, is not benign. It's wearing down your nervous system. It's disrupting your sleep. It's affecting your physical health. Not because you're posting too much. Because your entire physiology is now tethered to the approval of people who don't know you. The real reason you feel simultaneously fed and starving is neurochemical. The dopamine hit from a like mimics the feeling of being valued. But dopamine is fast. It spikes and crashes. Genuine human connection produces oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which is slower, deeper, and longer lasting. Oxytocin comes from eye contact, physical touch, vulnerable conversation, shared experience. Things that can't be delivered through a screen. Your brain is getting the fast food version of belonging and wondering why it's still hungry. Because dopamine without oxytocin is stimulation without nourishment. It's the neurochemical equivalent of eating sugar for every meal. The energy comes fast and leaves faster, and the body slowly deteriorates from malnutrition while technically never missing a meal. You now understand the chemistry of the trap. Your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, seeking social belonging, responding to social signals. The problem is that the signals are synthetic. The belonging is simulated. And the system delivering those signals was built not to nourish you, but to keep you hungry. Let's look at that system. Chapter 2. The Hunger Machine: How Platforms Weaponize Your Need to be Seen. Your need to be seen is ancient. It's one of the most fundamental human needs. Psychologist Abraham Maslow put belonging and esteem right in the center of his hierarchy, more basic than creativity, more urgent than self-actualization. You need to feel that you matter to someone, that your presence registers, that your existence has weight. This need isn't weakness. It's the operating system that kept the human species alive for 200,000 years. And a handful of companies have figured out how to monetize it. Social media platforms are not in the connection business. If they were, they'd be designed to help you form deep, lasting bonds and then let you go. Instead, they're designed to simulate connection just enough to keep you coming back without ever feeling full. This is the business model: keep the hunger alive. Because hungry people keep scrolling. Hungry people keep posting. Hungry people keep checking. And every check, every scroll, every post generates data that gets sold to advertisers. Your need to feel valued has been converted into a revenue stream. And the revenue is maximized not when you feel seen, but when you feel almost seen, almost valued, almost enough. That almost is the engine of the entire machine. This is crucial. The platforms don't want you to feel full. Full people leave. Full people put their phones down and go live their lives. The ideal user from a business perspective is someone who is perpetually seeking validation but never quite finding enough of it. Someone who posts, checks, refreshes, posts again. Someone whose self-worth is just unstable enough to require constant external maintenance. That's not a side effect of the design. That's the design itself. Let's talk about how this works mechanically. The algorithm doesn't show your post to everyone who follows you. It shows it to a small sample first. If that sample engages, the algorithm shows it to more people. If they don't, it buries it. This means your content's reach, and by extension, the validation you receive is determined not by how many people care about you, but by how well your content performs as engagement bait. The algorithm doesn't measure friendship. It measures reactivity. A post that triggers jealousy will outperform a post that brings peace. A photo that makes people feel inadequate will reach more people than a photo that makes them feel calm. And a post that generates comments, even negative ones, is algorithmically superior to a post that brings quiet connection. Most people miss this about the numbers they're chasing. The like count is not a measure of how many people value you. It's a measure of how well your content triggered the algorithm's engagement metrics. Someone could genuinely love you and never see your post because the algorithm decided it wasn't reactive enough to distribute. Meanwhile, a stranger could engage with your content for entirely shallow reasons, and the algorithm counts it as proof that your post worked. You're measuring your worth with a ruler that doesn't measure worth. It measures engagement. And engagement and worth are not the same thing. They're not even in the same category. Here's another mechanism the platforms use to keep you dependent, and it's one of the most psychologically sophisticated. The notification system is calibrated for maximum behavioral control. Notifications don't arrive in a logical, natural pattern. They're batched, staggered, and timed to create the variable reward pattern we discussed in the last chapter. Sometimes your phone buzzes immediately after posting. Sometimes there's a long, agonizing silence, minutes stretching into what feels like hours, followed by a sudden burst of activity that floods your reward circuits. This unpredictability is entirely deliberate. Studies on notification design show that unpredictable notification timing produces significantly higher checking behavior than predictable timing. If you knew exactly when feedback would arrive, you check once and be done. But because you never know when the next hit is coming, you check compulsively. The platform knows that the gap between posting and receiving feedback is a window of maximum psychological vulnerability. In that window, your cortisol is elevated, your attention is fractured, your mood is suspended in limbo, and you're primed to return to the app at the slightest signal. The notification arrives not when it's natural, not when someone actually liked your post, but when it's maximally effective at pulling you back into the machine. Here's what actually happens when platforms introduce new features: stories that disappear in 24 hours, view counts on posts, subscriber numbers. Each new metric is a new axis of comparison, a new number to obsess over, a new way to measure yourself and find yourself lacking. These features aren't designed to enhance your experience. They're designed to create new sources of insecurity that drive new engagement behaviors. When platforms added visible like counts, engagement soared because people became obsessed with their numbers. When some platforms experimented with hiding like counts, engagement dropped because the anxiety decreased. The anxiety is the feature, not the bug. The platforms know this. Internal documents from major social media companies have confirmed that their own research showed features harming user mental health. They kept the features anyway, because the features were profitable. Let's talk about what this does to the content you create. This is where the machine's damage becomes personal. When validation becomes the goal of creation, authenticity becomes the first casualty. You stop posting what's real and start posting what performs. You learn through trial and error, through the pain of posts that flopped and the high of posts that soared, which version of yourself gets the most approval. The funny version, the pretty version, the successful version, the vulnerable but not too vulnerable version, the relatable version that's carefully calculated to seem uncalculated, and you amplify that version while suppressing everything else. The rough edges get filed down, the controversial opinions get softened, the real struggles get repackaged into inspirational narratives with neat resolutions. Over time, the gap between who you are online and who you are offline becomes a canyon. You're performing a character. And the exhausting part isn't even the performance itself, it's the loneliness that comes with it. Because nobody in the audience knows the real you. The likes aren't for you. They're for the character. They're for the curated projection you spent an hour crafting. And somewhere deep inside, in the place the likes can't reach, you know this. And that knowledge, being seen by hundreds or thousands and truly known by none, is one of the loneliest experiences a human being can have in a world that claims to be more connected than ever. This is the machine. It takes your fundamental need to belong, wraps it in a dopamine delivery system, and converts your hunger into its profit. It doesn't feed you. It farms you. And every notification, every like, every heart and comment and share is not an act of connection. It's a pellet dispensed to keep the lab rat pressing the lever. But the machine's damage goes deeper than the hunger cycle. It's not just making you dependent on validation. It's dismantling the parts of you that don't generate engagement. Your quiet parts, your private parts, your weird, wonderful, unmarketable parts. The parts that actually make you who you are. That's what we need to face next. Chapter 3. The parts of you that don't get likes. Let's talk about the person you've stopped being, not the person you perform online, the other one. The one who has opinions that aren't popular. The one who has hobbies that aren't photogenic. The one who finds joy in things that would never go viral. The one who existed before she learned which version of herself gets the most approval. That person has been getting smaller, not because she's less valuable, because she doesn't generate engagement. And in a world where engagement is the currency of worth, the parts of you that don't perform get starved of oxygen. This is the hidden cost of the validation trap. It's not just that you become dependent on external approval. It's that you unconsciously abandon every part of yourself that doesn't receive it. Psychologists call this identity editing, and it works through the simplest learning mechanism in existence: reinforcement. The parts of you that get rewarded, liked, praised, commented on, shared, get amplified. You do more of what works. The parts that don't get rewarded, ignored, underperforming, crickets, get suppressed. You do less of what doesn't work. Over time, your public self becomes a highlight reel of your most likable traits, and your actual self, the full, complicated, contradictory, beautifully imperfect human being you are, becomes a rough draft you're embarrassed by. A version you'd never post. A version you're slowly forgetting how to be. The most insidious part is that this editing feels voluntary. You don't feel like something is being taken from you. You feel like you're making smart choices about what to share. You're curating your brand. You're being strategic. But strategy and suppression look identical when the strategy is always show the likable, hide the real. And after enough years of that strategy, the line between what you choose to hide and what you've lost the ability to access becomes dangerously blurry. This is crucial. You didn't choose to edit your identity. It happened through conditioning, the same basic mechanism that trains any animal to repeat rewarded behaviors and abandon unrewarded ones. Your brain tracked which parts of you got likes and which didn't. It amplified the winners and muted the losers. The funny posts got engagement, so you became funnier. The beautiful photos got likes, so you invested more in appearance. The inspirational captions got shares, so you started performing wisdom. And the quiet, complicated, contradictory, messy parts of you, the parts that make you human, got filed under not for public consumption. Not because they're bad, because they don't perform. Let me name some of the things that probably don't make it to your feed. The afternoons when you feel nothing in particular, and that's perfectly fine. The hobby you do badly but love anyway. The face you make when you're concentrating and don't know anyone's watching. The opinion you hold that would lose you followers. The relationship moments that are tender but not photogenic. The failures that taught you something but aren't wrapped in a redemption narrative. The grief you carry that doesn't have a silver lining. The boredom, the doubt, the ordinary Tuesdays. These are the textures of an actual life, and they've been systematically edited out of your identity because they don't generate the one thing your brain has been trained to chase. Most people miss this about the editing process. It doesn't just affect what you show, it affects what you feel. When you suppress parts of yourself long enough, you don't just hide them from others. You lose access to them yourself. The opinion you never voiced starts to feel less real. The hobby you never shared starts to feel less valid. The joy you never posted starts to feel less significant. You begin to believe, unconsciously, that the things about you that nobody likes are the things about you that don't matter. And your inner life, the vast, rich, complicated landscape of who you actually are, shrinks to fit the dimensions of a content grid. Here's what actually happens to your creativity when validation becomes the filter through which everything passes. Before the trap, you created things because they meant something to you. You wrote because words were building up inside and needed somewhere to go. You made things because making things made you feel alive in a way that consuming never could. The audience, if there was one, was secondary. Sometimes there was no audience at all, and that was fine. The act itself was the reward. The satisfaction lived in the doing, not in the response. Inside the validation trap, creation becomes a transaction, an exchange. You make something, and before it's even finished, sometimes before it's even started, your brain is already computing how it will be received. Will people like it? Will it get shares? Is it on trend? Will the algorithm push it? Does it fit the format that performs well? Is it too long, too honest, too weird? This pre-evaluation kills creative risk at the root. You stop making the strange, personal, experimental, vulnerable things that only you would make, the things that carry your actual fingerprint, and start making the safe, optimized, algorithm-friendly things that everybody makes. Your creative voice, the thing that makes your work genuinely yours, gets sanded down to fit a template that the algorithm rewards. And the tragedy isn't just that your content becomes more generic. It's that the part of you that used to create for the pure, private, unperformative joy of creating slowly forgets how. That muscle atrophies. And you don't notice it's gone until you try to create something without thinking about how it'll perform, and you realize you can't remember how that felt. Let's talk about relationships. The validation trap doesn't just distort your relationship with yourself. It distorts your relationships with everyone around you. When your worth depends on external approval, you become transactional in your connections. You evaluate people partly by their social capital. You curate which relationships are visible based on how they look. You stage moments of connection for documentation rather than experience. And the people closest to you, the ones who see past the performance, start to feel like they're not enough for you. Because they're not performing back. They're just being real. And real has become boring compared to the dopamine hit of 1,000 strangers tapping a heart. Research on attachment theory shows that people with high validation dependency develop what psychologists call anxious attachment patterns in their relationships. They seek constant reassurance. They interpret ambiguity as rejection. They measure their partner's love in visible, quantifiable gestures rather than in quiet presence. Social media trains these patterns by teaching your brain that love is measurable, that attention is quantifiable, and that anything not publicly displayed might not be real. This bleeds into every relationship you have, with your partner, your friends, your family, even your children. You start needing to be seen instead of simply being present. And presence, quiet, unperformative, unfilmed presence, is what love actually requires. The real reason you feel starving despite being fed is that you've been eating the wrong food. Likes feed the performance. They feed the character. They feed the curated version of you that exists inside a screen. But they don't reach the real you. The you that exists when the phone is off and the audience is gone and it's just you in a room with your own thoughts. That person hasn't been fed in years. That person has been edited, suppressed, and starved of the one thing she actually needs: unconditional self-regard. Worth that doesn't depend on output. Value that doesn't require a number. You now see the chemistry, the machine, and the cost. The question becomes, how do you feed the real you? How do you break the dependency and build a source of worth that doesn't require a single notification? That's the shift. And it starts right now. Chapter 4. The shift from external feeding to internal nourishment. The trap works because your self-worth depends on input you can't control. Likes, comments, followers, engagement, all of it is determined by algorithms, timing, trends, and the moods of strangers. You have almost zero control over the fuel your worth runs on. And that powerlessness is the core of the suffering. So the shift isn't about getting more validation. It's about needing less. Not through suppression, not through pretending you don't care. Through building an internal system of worth that generates its own fuel. A system that runs on what you do, what you choose, and who you are, not on what strangers think about it. This is the move from contingent self-worth to unconditional self-worth. Contingent means conditional. I'm worthy if I get liked. I'm valuable if I get engagement. Unconditional means I'm worthy, period. The evidence is in how I live, not in how I'm received. This isn't a motivational poster. This is a structural change in the architecture of your self-esteem. And it requires specific, practiced, daily work. The framework has 4 parts. Part 1, the validation audit. Before you can break a dependency, you have to see it clearly. For 1 week, track every time you check for validation. Every time you open an app to see notifications. Every time you refresh a post. Every time you check a like count. Don't try to stop, just count. At the end of the week, look at the number. Most people are staggered by it. 50, 100, 200 checks in a week, often more. This isn't information you should feel ashamed of. It's information you need to see, because you can't change a pattern you're unconscious to. The audit makes the invisible visible, and visible patterns can be interrupted. This is crucial. The audit also reveals your trigger points. When do you check most? After posting. When bored, when anxious, when you've had a difficult conversation, when you're alone. Each trigger tells you something important about what the validation is substituting for. Boredom checks mean you've lost connection to internal engagement. Anxiety checks mean you're using approval to soothe distress. Post-posting checks mean your worth is literally hanging on a number. Knowing your triggers is the map. And the map tells you exactly where to build new pathways. Part 2, the worth inventory. This is the counter-evidence project. Your brain has spent years building a case that your worth depends on external validation. Every viral post reinforced it. Every low engagement post reinforced it in the opposite direction. The file is thick and well documented. Now you build a competing file. Every evening, spend 2 minutes writing down 3 things. Something you did today that required effort, regardless of whether anyone noticed. Something you experienced today that mattered to you, regardless of whether it was photogenic. Something you are, some quality you hold that exists whether or not a single person approves of it. These aren't affirmations. Affirmations are what you wish were true. This is evidence of what is true. You made dinner. That required effort. You had a conversation that felt real. That mattered. You are patient with your children even when it's hard. That quality exists whether or not you ever post about it. This practice builds what psychologists call non-contingent self-esteem, worth that isn't conditional on any outcome. Over time, the internal file starts competing with the external one. And eventually it wins. Because the internal evidence is consistent, reliable, and can't be taken away by an algorithm update. Most people miss this about building internal worth. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't hit the way a viral post hits. There's no dopamine rush, no surge of approval. It feels quiet, almost boring, and that's exactly the point. The quiet is what nourishment feels like when you've been living on stimulation. It takes time for your nervous system to recalibrate, to recognize that the slow, steady feeling of knowing your own worth is more sustainable than the spike and crash of external validation. Trust the quiet. It's the feeling of actually being fed. Part 3. The creation purification. This is about reclaiming your creative life from the algorithm's grip. Choose one creative act: writing, cooking, drawing, building, playing music, dancing, gardening, anything that involves making something that wasn't there before, and do it with one absolute rule. It can never be posted, never shared online, never photographed for later posting, never documented in any form that could become content. It exists only for you and the experience of making it. Nobody will ever see it. Nobody will ever evaluate it. Nobody will ever tap a heart or leave a comment or decide whether it was good enough. This practice is profoundly uncomfortable for people deep in the validation trap, and that discomfort is itself diagnostic. It tells you exactly how deep the trap goes. If you can't create something without immediately thinking about how it will be received, if the first thought after making something beautiful is, how would this look as a post? Then the algorithm hasn't just captured your attention. It's captured your creative impulse at its source. It's colonized the part of you that makes things. The purification reclaims that territory. One act of creation, done purely for its own sake, with no audience and no metrics, rebuilds the neural pathway between making and internal satisfaction. The pathway that existed before likes and shares taught your brain that creation without audience is creation without value. That pathway isn't gone. It's just buried, and every unpublished creation digs it out a little more. Part 4. The identity reclamation. This is the most important and the most uncomfortable. You need to reintroduce yourself to the parts you've edited out, the opinions you suppressed for likability, the hobbies you abandoned because they weren't photogenic, the aspects of your personality that don't perform well but make you who you are. Start small. Express one honest opinion this week that you would normally filter for approval. Spend an hour on an activity you love that has zero social media value. Let someone see a version of you that isn't optimized. Each act of reclamation is a small rebellion against the identity editing that the validation trap imposed. And each rebellion strengthens the parts of you that have been starving. Here's what actually happens when you practice these 4 parts consistently. The dependency doesn't vanish. You're human. You'll still feel the pull of approval. You'll still notice like counts. You'll still have moments where a number affects your mood. But the power balance shifts. Validation goes from being the main course to being a side dish. From being the foundation of your worth to being a pleasant addition that you enjoy when it comes and don't collapse when it doesn't. The hunger quiets. Not because you stopped eating, because you finally started eating real food. The real reason this framework works is that it replaces the source of fuel, not the need for fuel. You still need to feel worthy. Every human does. The shift is in where that feeling comes from. External worth is unstable, addictive, and controlled by forces that don't care about you. Internal worth is stable, self-renewing, and entirely yours. You're not giving up the need to feel valued. You're giving up the belief that a notification is the only way to feel it. You have the understanding and the framework. Now you need to make it survive contact with tomorrow morning. That's the final chapter. Chapter 5. Living Fed. Daily Practices for a Post-Validation Life. Everything up to this point has been understanding and framework. This chapter is about survival, because tomorrow morning your phone will be right where you left it. The notifications will be waiting. The algorithm will have content ready to trigger every circuit we've discussed, and the old patterns will feel more natural than the new ones. That's the challenge, not learning this material, living it, every day, in a world that profits from your hunger. Practice 1, the morning check-in, not check-up. When you wake up before any screen, put your hand on your chest and ask, how am I right now before the world tells me how I should be? This isn't meditation, it's not journaling. It's a 2-second internal check in that grounds you in your own experience before external inputs override it. How do you actually feel? Not how many notifications are waiting, not what's trending, not what someone else posted while you slept. How are you? That question, asked before the phone, anchors your day in self-awareness instead of other awareness. The version of you that answers that question is the real you. Feed her first. This is crucial. The first input of your day determines the operating system for the next several hours. If the first thing you absorb is other people's content and the feedback on your own, your entire morning runs on comparison and validation software. If the first thing you absorb is your own internal state, your feelings, your values, your sense of yourself independent of any number, your morning runs on self-knowledge software. Same brain, different start, completely different day. Practice 2, the posting pause. Before you share anything, wait 15 minutes, not to time yourself, to ask a question during the wait. Am I posting this because I want to share or because I need to be fed? There's nothing wrong with sharing. Humans share. It's connective and natural. But there's a massive difference between sharing from fullness and posting from hunger. Sharing from fullness sounds like, this was meaningful to me and I'd like others to see it. Posting from hunger sounds like, I need someone to validate that this matters. The pause gives you the space to tell the difference. If it's sharing, post it and move on without checking. If it's hunger, Put the phone down and go do something that actually feeds you. Most people miss this distinction between sharing and seeking. They look identical from the outside. Same post, same photo, same caption. The difference is entirely internal, and the internal difference changes everything. Sharing doesn't create dependency because the worth doesn't hinge on the response. Seeking creates dependency because the entire point is the response. The posting pause trains you to notice which one is driving the behavior before you press the button. Practice 3. Engagement fasting. 1 day per week, do not check any engagement metrics on any post. Don't check likes. Don't check comments. Don't check followers. Don't check views. Don't check stories views. Don't check who shared what. Let the numbers exist without knowing them for 24 hours. This practice directly confronts the compulsion at its core. It strips away the behavior that maintains the dependency, the checking, the refreshing, the counting, and forces your brain to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. The anxiety you feel during the fast, and you will feel it, especially the first few times, is the withdrawal. It's your brain demanding the pellet. It's the same restless, itchy urgency an addict feels when the substance is withheld. Sitting with that anxiety without feeding it, without caving, without just quickly checking, that's how you break the cycle. Each week, the anxiety decreases slightly. The compulsion weakens by a fraction. Your brain slowly, reluctantly learns that it can survive a full day without external confirmation of your worth. That you can go 24 hours without a single stranger's approval and still be intact, still be functional, still be you on the other side. Practice 4. The depth investment. Take the time you used to spend crafting, posting, and monitoring content and invest it in one real relationship. Not a social media relationship. A face-to-face, voice-to-voice, presence-to-presence relationship. Call someone you haven't called in months. Have a conversation that isn't documented. Share something vulnerable without crafting how it sounds. Listen to someone without thinking about what to say next. This practice replaces the synthetic belonging of likes with the actual belonging of human connection. Oxytocin instead of dopamine. Nourishment instead of stimulation. The feeling after a real conversation lasts hours, sometimes days. The feeling after a like lasts seconds. Your brain needs to remember the difference. The depth investment reminds it. Practice 5. The private joy. Once per day, experience something beautiful, satisfying, or meaningful and deliberately do not document it. Don't photograph it. Don't post about it. Don't even tell anyone. Let it exist solely between you and the experience. This practice is rehabilitation for your ability to feel without performing. The validation trap has trained you to believe that unexperienced moments without documentation, don't fully count. This is a lie the algorithm installed. The moments that count most in your life were never posted. Your child's first laugh. The time someone said the exact right thing when you needed it. The afternoon you spent doing absolutely nothing and felt completely at peace. None of those required a single like to be real. The private joy practice rebuilds your trust in unwitnessed experience. It teaches your brain that value and visibility are not the same thing. Here's what actually happens over weeks of consistent practice. The hunger changes. It doesn't disappear, you're human, and the need for belonging is permanent. But it transforms from a desperate, compulsive craving into a calm, occasional appetite. You still enjoy being seen. You still appreciate when someone values your work, but you don't need it to function. You don't need it to feel okay about yourself. You don't collapse when it doesn't come. Your worth has a new foundation, one built from your daily check-ins, your worth inventory, your creative reclamation, your depth investments, your private joys. A foundation that no algorithm can erode. A foundation that no low engagement post can crack. Because it wasn't built by strangers. It was built by you. Let me be honest about the timeline. The first week is uncomfortable. You'll feel the compulsion constantly and catch yourself reaching for the phone dozens of times. That's awareness, not failure. The second and third weeks, the compulsion starts to lose its urgency. You notice it, but it doesn't control you the way it used to. By week 4 and beyond, something shifts that's hard to describe. A quietness, a groundedness. A sense that you're standing on something solid instead of floating on something unstable. That's internal worth taking hold. That's what being fed actually feels like when you've been starving on stimulation for years. You have everything you need now. The understanding, the framework, the daily practices. You know why you've been hungry. You know what real food looks like. The only thing left is the choosing. Let's be honest about what's about to happen. You're going to close this audiobook, and within minutes, maybe seconds, you're going to feel the pull, the familiar itch, the impulse to check, to see what happened while you were listening. How many likes? How many comments? How many people confirmed your existence while you were busy learning that you don't need them to? That pull is the trap doing its job. Recognize it for what it is, not a need, a compulsion, a trained response from a brain that's been conditioned to believe that your worth lives inside a notification. It doesn't, it never did. The notification was always empty calories. It was always a simulation of the thing you actually need. And the thing you actually need, genuine self-regard, unconditional worth, the deep, quiet knowledge that you are enough without performance, cannot be delivered through a screen. It can only be built by you from the inside, one practice at a time. While you decide whether tomorrow is really the day you start the morning check-in, the machine keeps running. It's counting on you to forget this. It's counting on the compulsion being stronger than the insight. It's counting on you posting tonight and checking 30 minutes later and feeling the familiar hit and calling it connection. It's counting on you measuring your evening by the numbers and calling it fulfillment. It's been right about you every day for years. Every day, it predicted you'd choose the pellet over the meal. The stimulation over the nourishment, the performance over the life. Is it right about you today? Is it right about you tomorrow morning? You're telling yourself this is harder than it sounds, that the practices seem simple but real life is complicated, that you'll start next week when things settle down, that you just need to finish one more scroll session, process one more batch of notifications, and then you'll be ready to change. That's the hunger talking. The hunger always has a reason to delay, because delay means another feeding, and another feeding means the cycle continues. And the cycle continuing is all the machine has ever needed from you. It doesn't need your loyalty. It doesn't need your love. It just needs your attention, and your hunger guarantees it. Right now, choose. Are you the person who performs her life for strangers and waits for their approval to feel okay? Or are you the person who builds her worth from the inside and lets the likes be what they actually are? A tap from someone who's already forgotten your post. Trying to stop caring what people think doesn't work. You've tried. Being doesn't require you to stop caring. It requires you to start caring about something deeper. Your own standards. Your own creative voice. Your own uncurated, unfiltered, unpostable life. The one that doesn't get likes because it's too real and too messy and too beautifully human for a content grid. You've been fed by likes and starving inside for years. That ends when you decide it ends. Not when the algorithm changes. Not when the engagement comes. Not when the numbers finally feel like enough. They never will. Enough was never in the numbers. Enough was in you this whole time, buried under 1,000 performances, waiting for you to stop feeding the character and start feeding yourself. Tomorrow morning, hand on chest, how am I before the world tells me how I should be? Start there, feed there, live there.